The hits and the misses of the Modi government as it prepares to celebrate its third anniversary in office. And who better than Arvind Virmani, Sunil Alagh and Ajit Ranade to join us right here on ET Now. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. And Ajit Ranade, let me begin with you and let me just address the bull by its horns right away. The most pressing topic perhaps before the Indian economy has to do with NPA resolution. Be candid on this show this evening. Do you believe the government has been a little too late in tackling it, and whatever it has now done via way of its ordinance and oversight committees, will it finally resolve the NPMS?
Well, Supriya, whether it's too late or not is a moot question because we have to tackle this problem head on, and it's good that we have taken it on in a big way in the sense of actually an ordinance cleared by the cabinet. It just shows its seriousness. It just shows that you need a very unconventional approach where we empower the bankers and we basically take care of one of the key concerns, which is the CAG, CVC, CBI hanging sword. So I think things are moving. It's a very hard problem to solve even in ordinary times, and these are extraordinary times. There's no point saying that we should have solved it 3 years ago or 2 years ago. I think it's good to see that it's got so much importance. In fact, I remember the chief economic advisor saying that don't think of NPA as a banking problem. It's actually a national problem.
It is a national problem, and that's why I'm coming to you, Dr. Dr. Virmani. We don't want to sort of celebrate all the good that's happened. I think that's very visible, and we've got graphics that are going to come on the screen on the ET CEO poll, which has given a sort of thumbs up to this government. But Dr. Virmani, on the issue of NPA, if it was a national problem, why has it taken this government 3 years to get to the bottom of this? And are you, as an economist, convinced that this is going to fix the problem once and for all?
Well, you'll have to ask them why they've taken 3 years. I have no idea. But certainly, I think they've been a little slower than one would have liked, and also slower than many expected. As far as solving the problem is concerned, how can a step setting up an institution be a solution? I mean, we have to wait and see what it's going to do. I mean, all we have is an ordinance. So, but if you want to know my views on the NPA problem, I have dealt with it internationally and nationally. The real key issue is what I call the sharing of costs between the borrower, the lender and the government. Of course, when most of the problem is the public sector, then the public sector and the government are the same. So it becomes a question of sharing the cost between the private borrower and the government plus banks. I think as far as government plus banks is concerned, internal, that's purely a technical issue. It's not a substantive issue. So how they will address the problem? The whole problem has been that generally it's a problem with all such cases across the world, whether it's Greece or Ireland or anything. It's people always think that the economy is going to improve and the problem will disappear. And that's a very bad way to approach it, actually. And the other way is to make fantastic projections of the recovery of an economy or an industry or a sector, and then similarly assume that the problem will disappear. The big lesson we learned from the Asian crisis was that you define the problem, deal with it, there's no perfect solution, and the important thing is to get it done quickly. And then the recovery occurs much faster than if you keep waiting and thinking the problem will get solved by itself.
All right, that's the view on the NPA. That's one of the issues, and we want to quickly cover ground on 5-6 critical issues as far as the broader economy is concerned. Sunil Alagh, let's talk about the other big issue that's sort of taken center stage over the last 6-8 months, and that's demonetization. We had Aditya Puri join us this morning and said make a strong case for how demonetization has done a lot of good to the economy. And then we heard comments coming in from Kaushik Basu, former chief economic advisor and an eminent economist, saying that it's taken about 1.5% from our potential GDP target for this year. So we could have been growing at 8.5%, we're ending up growing at 7%. Was demonetization a self-goal?
No, I don't think so. I was one of the early supporters of demonetization, and in the very first week I'd said it that I think we expect instant gratification from almost every move of the government. And if we think in 2 years or 1 year we're going to solve everything, my big takeaway from what has happened in the last 2.5 years is that we finally have one Prime Minister who's decisive. Now we've got to evaluate that he's taking a lot of actions. Whether all actions are right or wrong, they are in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. And demonetization was, and I agree with Aditya Puri, if 1.5%, that means we'd have ended at 8.5%, is also a ridiculous figure that Kaushik Basu is talking about. So it was a loss of 1 or 1.5% for 1 quarter. It wasn't a 1.5% throughout the year. So if you take November, December and January, the 3 months which really impacted, actually it was December and Jan really, when 2 months when the economy fell. So even if you take 1% away and divide it over 12 months, that's not the impact of demonetization at all. And the objective of demonetization, we are forgetting altogether. Look, the nation has digitized everywhere that I'm going in Singapore. And I just want to raise one very quick point, that today, what are we poised at? We've got 1.25 billion people and we are trying to attract investments from all over. 900 million have phones, mobile phones in their hand, of which about 325 million have smartphones. Now, what are we going to do with this particular growth that we have seen? Is that you're going to digitize the economy. It's never going to be cashless, but there's going to be less cash. There's going to be wider tax payments. Everybody is moving in the right direction and the results are going to come over the next 1 to 2 years. Don't expect the results to come in 3 months. Demonetization is not a tap. It's also supposed to stop corruption. We are never going to be corruption free in this country or anywhere in the world for that matter. But has it reduced corruption? Yes, it has, according to me. So I think demonetization has been a great move, and I've been saying it from the end of November last year.
Okay, Ajit Ranade, I'm going to take this with you. A majority of the Indians' chief executives and, the tallest captains of Indian industry who were a part of this poll have said that the crackdown on black money, especially post-demonetization, the taxman has undue powers. I mean, one of the debates that we've been having on this channel is tax terror back to haunt? We've already seen the finance minister come and make this shame and name and shame list today. But is tax terror back? I mean, there is undue power that is given to the taxman. Do you fear tax terror could be back to haunt Indians, and especially Indian industry at large?
Now, this is of course a very important and cautionary point you mentioned, because actually it was the BJP when it was in opposition which raised this term, which actually introduced this term called tax terrorism. So I hope this government led by the BJP is extra vigilant and extra careful about not unleashing the very term that they introduced while they were in opposition. Yes, there is a concern because in fact the finance bill had this clause which actually subsumed several tribunals into one, and there are extra powers given to the taxman. So it should not be the case that while black money and corruption are very important issues, they should not end up being being upsetting the balance of checks and the checks and powers that we have. By the way, black money problem is not merely tackled by one stroke, whether it's demonetization or tax rates. It's actually a multiple thing. So if you go back over the last 2-3 years, there have been many different there have been many steps taken, and this should be just one step out of several, and I'm sure many are coming. For example, black money doesn't reside in cash piles. It resides in either Benami land or foreign exchange, foreign accounts, or in gold. So it's a long process.
Okay, it is indeed a long drawn process, but I want to also turn focus to the other part of this discussion, and I have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to quickly keep jumping topics. And let me just begin with this one with you, Ajit Ranade. The twin deficits that one speaks about, whether it is CAD, whether it is fiscal deficit, that is under control. Inflation targets, I think we've overachieved that, and that's a big green on this government's report card. But have our macros been tested against tough global environment? I mean, is this government simple, plain lucky with crude staying at where it is? Because the previous government tasted levels at $150 a barrel. Here, crude is refusing to cross even 50 at times. So, is this government plain lucky, or have our macros just not been tested against a tough macro environment, globally speaking? And I'm referring more to oil and commodity. Ajit Ranade?
Well, three things I'd like to say. First is that even the great Napoleon said that the general that he wanted was not merely competent and brave, but also lucky. So let's not discount luck factor. Secondly, it's true that there was a large fiscal benefit that the government got because of lower oil prices. It helped them to reduce inflation and also have less burden or less tension, less pressure on its fiscal situation. But they could have frittered it away. It's possible that you get this fiscal bonanza, but you end up spending it unwisely. I think to its credit, the government was careful and prudent in making sure that it was used to keep inflation in check, as well as redirecting some of the big benefits towards infrastructure spending. This year we got almost 3.9 lakh crores allocated to infrastructure and also rural spending. So that's the second point. The third point is that you see the macro management has benefited from also this MPC, the fact that inflation has been a focus. So earlier the mandate was not clearly an anti-inflation mandate. Now we have that. So I don't think it's fair to say that merely because of luck factor the government has managed a good macro. I think it's a combination of luck but also deft and prudent fiscal as well as monetary management.
Virmani, comment on that. Do you believe our macros have been tested in an environment as far as crude is concerned which has been largely favorable? Or would you counter that by saying that we've had 2 successive years of drought which also put a significant strain on the economy? So in balance it sort of evens out. What's your own view, Dr. Virmani?
So the way I look at it is from the view of policies. If you have good policies, when the test comes, it will be a positive test. So it's not a question of whether it's been tested or not, or do they have the right policies. So what are the policies which are needed? One, on the tax side, you need tax reform. So we have the GST, we've got moving forward finally on the corporate tax which was promised 2 years ago. Where we have been slow is the personal income tax, but at least we've started. Many of us had recommended that to sustain the tax buoyancy which would result from the demonetization, you had to start some personal income tax reform. The only area of tax and QR reform which hasn't happened is customs. On the expenditure side, again, the big moves of linking Aadhaar and subsidies, which was in my original report, commission report, which I chaired on the UID, which was one of the important reasons why we suggested UID. That has been taken forward. It was stalling. It was being critiqued by the previous government's own party, etc. So that is putting you on the right. Again, one can always say that the extension to kerosene and the other subsidies has been a bit slow, but the basic principle has been accepted. It's moved forward, and is being propagated. And finally, on the so you have the tax side, the expenditure side, and the overall fiscal deficit. Again, the recommendations of the Finance Commission and the gradual reduction in the fiscal deficit is going on. So all those three things, in my view, are on the right track. I disagree with Ajit on the issue of monetary. I think the monetary policy has been much too tight, and one of the evidence you are seeing of that, which I just saw today, there are many evidences, but one of them is that India is now the top destination for carry trade. Carry trade basically happens if your real interest rates are too high relative to the world, so it's easy money for people to come in and out. But the most significant effect which happens is to undermine the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector. But anyway, you are discussing the government's fiscal stuff. I will leave the monetary aside. I am basically satisfied, but they shouldn't take their eyes off the ball. There is, of course, a fourth one, the capital, the sale of shares,
right,
where I think perhaps there has been some hesitation, though the talk on selling, loss-making units, etc., has gained some currency, and they've started talking about it. The planning, the Niti Aayog has talked about it, but it's not happened yet.
Sure. The other big red on the report card, and Sunil, like, I know you're largely sympathetic to the government, but the fact of the matter is its record on job creation has been abysmal. Now, part of the problem could be because of a manufacturing slowdown. Part of the problem could be because of a general global environment that hasn't been very conducive to investments. But, given the fact that we were creating about 10 lakh odd jobs about 3-4 years ago, and now that, it's about 1 lakh odd is the figure we look at, there's been a drastic cut in the pace of job creation. Is that the biggest sort of failure of this government over the last 3 years? Sunil Alagh?
Yeah, so sure. I mean, I think employment is extremely important. If you're going to bring about inclusive growth, there has to be employment generation. Now, why do you think the government has taken a couple of years? Where does the real employment come from in India? I mean, we talk about IT and we tend to hype it because whenever there's a drop in the recruitment of the IT industry, we think unemployment is coming in. But the real employment will be generated through infrastructure, when the roads start getting built, when the shipyards start getting built, when housing starts getting built, when the railways start spending money. Now, for the last 2 years, if we notice, there has been a slowing down of that, and I'm as much of a critic as you are. But in the last 1 year, and especially in this budget, there's massive amount of spending which is going to take place in infrastructure. Now, even then, you will get the results of it by the end of the year. So you won't get results right now on employment generation. And if you're talking about the kind of jobs that are getting out, we are becoming an area of commoditizing the IT part, and we need to reskill ourselves. And this is something which is happening in the world. So if you go back and if you really look at the way the Maharajas used to operate in generating employment, whenever there was a drought, whenever a nation was to build another palace, because everybody got employed, everybody got food. So if you take that palace building into infrastructure and into roads and into everything else which will develop the economy, I think that's the focus in the third year, and that's where we are going to get the employment formed. So we got to wait till December rather than getting too excited about, look at the number of startups. The other day I was on another channel when I said, okay, 30,000-40,000 jobs have been lost in the IT industry. But you add the number of people who've come up in startups, which is around 25 to 30,000, the net loss is only 20,000. So wait till December. I mean, instant gratification is what we are all looking for in macroeconomic sense. It never happens in any country.
Yes. I believe with you, and I perhaps sympathize with you, but Ajit Ranade, let's also address the other big, stance of this government, which was called Make in India, high decibel campaign, a blitzkrieg publicity launch, and yet it hasn't taken off. I mean, why did the government perhaps get it wrong completely? Because, it was supposed to be this job guzzler, and I can't not touch upon Make in India when we're talking about jobs, because factories of the future, as the government would want us to believe, are perhaps not going to be what factories right now are or of the past have been. They will not be job guzzlers. There'll be automation, there'll be artificial intelligence, there'll be robotics. There is also very little appetite for an export-led model. So did the government get the whole Make in India campaign, on which these jobs were really based upon or emphasized upon, completely wrong?
No, I don't think it got it wrong at all, because even Mr. Trump is talking about make in America, buy in America, invest in America. So, in fact, if anything, this was a campaign or slogan picked up by other countries. But you're right. We need to translate that slogan or that campaign, that big headline, into what does it mean on the ground. I think what it means is Make in India means make India competitive. So we are still lagging behind competitiveness. We are still lagging behind in terms of efficiencies or productivity, and that's where the ease of doing business whole program comes in. The fact that the Prime Minister keeps talking about ease of doing business is, at least it's been made a focus area. We have this interstate competition of ease of doing business ranking, which is also healthy, but basically that needs to also translate into what does it mean for a small entrepreneur, a 1 or 2 member or 5 member team to start business at the state level. So many of the hurdles possibly are at the state level. And that's where probably we have not done enough. So if you ask me, the Make in India translated into ground reality at the state level in terms of actual nitty-gritties of what you need to start a business, that's probably where we need to focus our attention.
All right. What about you, Dr. Virmani? I mean, I think the other big thing that the government scores very high on, and an overwhelming majority of CEOs, I'm going to come to you next, Sunil Alagh, but I think an overwhelming majority of CEOs have ranked the government very high, is bureaucracy, which is functioning a lot better under Mr. Modi. You know, and one is tempted to believe that policy paralysis has ended. Do you essentially agree with that? Is policy paralysis a thing of the past, or is too much centralization now replaced it?
Well, I think people have very short memories, but unfortunately I don't. I still remember in 2013 and 14 the agonizing and the articles and everything about how everything was paralyzed. And basically in the first year to let's say 18 months, much of that was cleared up. It covered, I don't know, it's worth reminding, the environmental clearances, the, I don't know, 50 GOMs which were functioning, which, you know, were presumably agonizing over certain policy decisions, etc., etc. So there is absolutely no doubt at all, I mean, for anybody who has a memory of 4 years, that there is a sea change in the decision making and the degree of backlog of you know, decisions being held up. Now just one thing on the Make in India, I would say that one clear evidence of a positive side is the FDI. Again, I mentioned it because one had a little bit of doubt on whether the kind of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch type of thing would prevail, and one has been very, very happily surprised that that has not happened. And the progress and the movement, in fact, I don't know if it's been a little faster, but yeah, it has been very good. And finally, the third point on your earlier point about jobs is really when you have two, you know, the question was asked to me whether these two droughts had an effect on the fiscal. I think the more important effect is exactly on job creation, because that is where the jobs are, that is where the demand for the labor intensive sectors like textiles and footwear, the basic stuff comes from, and that has really clearly been affected. So you had one normal monsoon last year. If you have another one as predicted, you will see the job picture changing quite considerably and visibly.
Mm-hmm. Last word to you, Sunil. Like, you know, I think the point that Dr. Virmani made as well, which is that, you know, the benchmark is clearly cannot be the previous government. I mean, I don't think anyone in the market or in the business community is going to compare this to the previous government and say, oh, they've done a good job. That's not the benchmark. The benchmark is, here is a prime minister who had a track record as a chief minister of Gujarat. Here is a government that has a political mandate overwhelmingly in favor of reform. And yet one feels that they haven't probably done justice to it 3 years down the line. You know, Dr. Virmani spoke about big reforms like privatization. We haven't seen a move on that. On the issue of NPA, they moved too late. Would you concede that the government hasn't moved as aggressively on economic reforms as it has moved on a lot of other social issues that are probably very close to or dear to its agenda?
You know, I just have, this is my personal view, perception is as important as reality when you are attracting foreign investment. You know, I remember 3 or 4 years ago when I was going to America, almost all the American investors were saying you are like number 20 out of, and you're not even on the radar for our investments. And today when I go there, we are in the top 3 or 4 that they are in, you're already in consideration. I think what Mr. Modi was doing in the first 1 or 2 years, wrong or right, was changing the perception abroad. And we were criticizing him, why is he traveling all over the world and he's on a tourism drive and things like that. What he did was he changed the perception of India. I'm not talking about the previous government, 2 years ago to now. Now is when he is getting into what he needs to do for the 3rd, 4th and 5th year in India, so that the investments that he wants to bring in, both from the domestic and the sector outside, are going to work. So please understand that he may be wrong, he may be right. He's very decisive. For once we have a prime minister who has no sons, no uncles, no aunts, nothing that can bring about corruption where you say, all right, Dr. Manmohan Singh is honest, but what about the rest? Modi is very clear. He's going after anybody in industry, anybody in politics, anybody in government. If they are found, they're going to get arrested and they're going to pay for it. So that's the first change that he's brought about. And the important thing is he's given hope to India. And now it's his job in the 3rd, 4th year and the 5th year to build on that hope and bring about the investments that are required.
Right.
And he's well on his way as far as I'm concerned.
All right. It's not bad having a family. It's not bad having an uncle or a son or an aunt at all. But on that note, thank you very, very much, Sunil Alagh, Ajit Rana Dey, and Arvind Virmani for being with us. This is a fascinating discussion on the appraisal report. I understand that. That was said in a lighter way. But thank you very much for being with us right here on ET Now.
Thank you. Thank you, Supriya. Thank you.
Right.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.